Don't worry about the drug dealer. The pedophile's creating a market for the drug dealer.
I look and think, well, you're a victim.
Yeah.
But there's almost this shaming that goes on for victims of sexual abuse for the kids, and it's wrong, but that's part of the manipulation.
When I hear a pedophile gets 6 months for 50 counts of abuses, I replay what happened to me and I go, that's worth more than 6 months.
Hi, I'm Gary Jubelin, and today I'm with Russell Manser. Russell was a career criminal. He spent a lot of time in prison, he robbed banks, but he also was a victim of child sexual abuse. And today, on the podcast series Predatory, we're going to talk to Russell about his experience and how it shaped his life, and also what he learnt from prison and how prevalent sexual abuse was of teenage or young children before they went down a life of crime. Russ, thanks for coming on Predatory.
Gary, thank you for having me again. I really enjoy what you do and I'm glad to be talking about this subject.
Well, it's time we put it in people's faces. We've got to understand what we're dealing with here, and quite often it's just too heavy to talk about. But I really appreciate you coming on and giving us your personal experiences.
Thank you, Gary. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to talk, and as we've got to know each other since I've left the police and your life's headed in a different direction. One of the things that really, I became aware of talking to you is the impact that sexual abuse has, not just on the child, but as the child grows into an adult. Do you want to tell us about your experience?
Yeah, I did. I unfortunately went to the notorious Darrick Boys Home in Western Sydney, and it was the subject of a 60-minute story.
Abuse.
What happened here has stayed a secret for decades.
Covered up.
Which had prolific sexual and physical abuse. Unfortunately, I didn't escape. That's where I was first sexually abused.
How old were you then?
14 turning 15. I was sexually abused there. Once again, all that sort of stuff was covered up, and I wonder, I often wonder if that was sort of... look, I'm pretty adamant a pedophile ring was operating out of there, because a lot of people that were abusing the kids never even worked there, so that was a worry. I went to jail at 16 years old as a deterrent type sentence. I was housed with the worst pedophiles in Australia at the time. Once again, sexually abused as a 16-year-old in prison, and led me on a trajectory of drug use. I was introduced to heroin by the perpetrators themselves as a way to keep my mouth shut, and led me on a trajectory of crime and an escalation of that crime, because what was happening for me was the abuse itself leaves you with some really serious emotional scars, and that's shame, embarrassment, challenging your sexuality, thinking, did I bring it on, or you know what I mean, did I lead these people on?
Yeah, I know when you raised that, when we've been talking about it, that sort of surprised me, because I look and think, well, you're a victim.
Yeah.
But there's almost this shaming that goes on for victims of sexual abuse for the kids, and it's wrong, but that's part of the manipulation.
100%. And a perpetrator's greatest weapon is his victim silence and shame.
Yeah.
It's massive. And they bank on that. They'll leave you with so much shame and embarrassment that you won't talk about it. And it works. It works.
Yeah.
It worked for me for a long time. I think it was like 35 years before I really came out, when the Royal Commission on Institutional Responses to Child Sexual created a safe platform for me to tell my story. I wasn't ever going to tell my story. I was going to live with that guilt and shame. And that guilt and shame, the only thing for me was I numbed that with heroin, right? Heroin was the thing that made me numb it. But to get heroin, I had to commit crime. And, and for me, I wanted large amounts of heroin, and heroin ain't cheap. So
and that was to dull the pain, dull the memories?
Oh, dull the nightmares, dull the shame of it all is, and I get moments of it now, and I'm starting to develop this thing where I shake my head, which is a bit of a worry. But the shame of it all is the most haunting thing there is of it all. It's like shame about, it's like a void. It's hard to explain that void, because what happens, you get robbed of your self-worth, your self-belief, and the only thing that can sort of, and I'm only working this out through trauma counselling, the only thing that can heal trauma for me is love. When I learned how to love myself, and that's been a long process.
Because I know you've spent a lot of time in jail.
23 years.
Yeah, and armed robberies.
Armed robberies. I escaped from custody. Like, the reason why I escaped from custody, because I didn't want to I didn't want to be living with in my own head.
Yeah.
In that was a torture chamber. Yeah. The jail was easy.
Yeah.
Being in my head without drugs was a torture chamber.
Right. And the anger that you
Yeah.
carried through with your life, is that part of it?
Oh,
Like you're
100%.
a big, strong guy. Is
Yeah,
that part of
100%.
you not wanting to be a victim again?
Yeah, look, after the abuse itself, I became this vigorous. I still do it today. I
Yeah.
train often 2 hours a day. When I was in prison, I was like I was training for the Olympics.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I was sending out a loud message in prison to potential perpetrators. It won't be
Come
easy,
near me and there's
and you'll get
consequences.
seriously hurt. And in prison, you make an example. If someone tries anything on you, make a serious example that that you're not to be messed with. And in that 23 years in prison, I must have made some good examples because I only ever had 6 fights in prison.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I must have made a pretty good example over those years.
Now, in prison too, and this is something that I was aware of, but not the extent of it until sitting down talking to yourself and people like yourself. How many people in prison have gone down that same path, that they're abused as children? And it's quite frightening. Do you want to talk us through
sure.
what you've discovered? Because you've been working with a group, or you established a group, Voice of a
The
Survivor.
Voice of a Survivor.
And what's come out of that?
Look, we've been the Voice of a Survivor. I established the Voice of a Survivor about 5 years ago, 5 years, 4 months ago to be exact. We've got 16,500 clients, and I reckon maybe 12,000 of them, 11,000 of them are in prison. 75, and this is what I reckon the stats are around about 75% of inmates in the prisons around Australia today were sexually abused or seriously physical abused.
So when we're talking about reducing crime, if we start at the core of it, if that's, and you can't attribute everything to anyone that commits a crime if they've been sexually abused, but it's clearly
It's a big contributing factor.
contributes heavily.
And this is what I talk about. I talk about the answer ain't in heavier sentences.
Yeah.
The answer is in dealing with the trauma. If we deal with that trauma of the abuse itself, I think we eliminate a massive. We do a big. We will seriously reduce the crime rates. It's not about deterrent. A deterrent. I got a deterrent. I went to Bajura Children's Court, and
Yeah.
the judge gave me a 12 months deterrent sentence. He sentenced me to an adult prison
Yeah.
to deter me from reoffending. Well, Judge Nostradamus got that wrong, because I ended up spending 23 years in prison. That wasn't a deterrent. It ain't. You can't bash trauma out of someone. You can't bash someone's experience. Like, you can't bash drug addiction out of this. A notion of we will re-traumatise these people to deal with their trauma. That
doesn't work.
Pedophiles create so much. They are trauma machines.
There's another thing that we've talked about too, and you get angry when I just mention it, is the sentences that pedophiles get compared to, you robbed a bank or the crimes that you committed, you put up there, and then pedophiles, the light sentencing for the impact they have on people's lives.
It's like I can't watch the news. I couldn't, like, if I've got an inkling there's going to be some sort of thing like a topic of a pedophile being sentenced, it's going to come on, I can't watch it. It's just too triggering. And for me, I was thinking about it on the plane on the way here. It's like one of those YouTube 10-minute shorts.
Yeah.
I replay the abuse in my head, and I go, my own abuse. When I hear a pedophile gets 6 months for 50 counts of abuses, I replay what happened to me, and I go, that's worth more than 6 months.
Yeah.
That's worth more than 6 months. It's crazy. And these people that are accessing porn, they're going possession of porn. They're accessories before and after the fact.
Yeah.
If they created they create the market for these pedophiles to do their thing and film stuff like that. The true charge for them people should be accessory before and after the fact of a sexual abuse.
Yeah.
I don't understand, because it's like they minimise the damage that child porn does.
They're contributing to
Yeah,
it.
they're investors in it.
Yeah.
They're people that are investing in child porn.
Yeah, if it was drug dealing,
Yeah.
you get them before and after.
Yeah.
People proceeds from drug dealing.
Yeah.
Or contributing to set up a
Yeah.
drug deal.
Yeah, they're investing, and I don't understand why we have these minimus. It wasn't that bad. He was only looking at images.
Yeah.
Like, I don't see it that way. They're just as bad.
Yeah. Well, look, I reckon it's great we're talking about it on this this podcast series called Predatory, because I think it's good. An ex-crook and an ex-cop coming together, and we both share the passion to make a difference. And it's a way of fighting crime and reducing crime and stopping the harm.
If we address these pedophiles, if we take them out of the equation, I guarantee you, in 10 years' time, the crime rates will be down by 40%.
Yeah.
If you really want to get a real result, start smashing them out of the park. Don't worry about the drug dealer. The pedophile's creating a market for the drug dealer.
And the funny part is we've got all these true crime buffs, people that are interested in crime, but it's too confronting. We'll talk about murders, but it's too confronting to talk about child sexual abuse, because talking about people having sex with children makes people feel uncomfortable, and I think people have got to come out and start talking about it.
I think 100%, and this stigma and shame that's involved, that surrounds it. I think one of my main aims was to get men and women to start talking about this thing, because all that guilt and shame doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the perpetrator himself. Start telling your story. Start the healing journey, and start making them accountable. Start making them. Don't give them nothing to hide behind. Don't let them hide behind your shame or your guilt or your anger. Yeah. Start push them out in the light where they belong, out in the light, so everyone sees them. They're the ones should be feeling this shame. All this horrible stuff that you feel, that's who should be feeling it.
That's good advice from Russell Manser. And Russell, I just want to thank you for making a difference. You stood up and talked about what happened to you, and I think you're leading the way in, let's pull it out from under the carpet.
For sure.
Make people talk about it. So,
and thank you, Gary, for highlighting it. And I thank you for being brave enough to highlight, because as you said, it's not an easy thing to talk.
People don't like it. It's too confronting, but let's put it in their face.
Let's
it's about
do that.
Time.
I'm there. Let's
Okay.
go.